Hello everyone, welcome to another Boaters Exchange second Tuesday seminar series. Today we're actually coming to you from the Mosquito Lagoon, and we're having some pretty good times out here just filming out in this weather. Typically we're doing it in more of a controlled environment with a larger group at Boaters Exchange, but today, due to the coronavirus and the the COVID-19 virus, we decided to do this a little bit more isolated and exercising our social distancing. And we're going to still bring some footage to you that hopefully you'll find entertaining. And maybe we'll learn a little bit about how to prepare for tournament fishing. So we're going to go into a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank all of my sponsors and Boaters Exchange for having me out. I couldn't do it without, the support of folks like the Lithium Battery Power, Bull Bay Rods, Sims, Mercury Marine, and we have quite a few sponsors, Power Pole, and those guys are all great. They've been very supportive, and I use them when I'm out tournament fishing, and all of their products or provide me with the opportunity to actually go out there and do what I do. So I want to thank all those guys, and again, thank you to Boaters Exchange for having us out. We're going to talk a little bit today about preparations for a tournament. I actually captured some video earlier on Google Earth as to what I do to prepare ahead of time before I actually put the boat in the water. So we'll cut to that in a little bit, and we'll show you how I go about preparing using online tools, online resources such as Google Earth, and we'll see how it can actually give you a jump start as to how you want to chart your plan, chart your path, and get a good game plan going before you even hit the water. So we're going to fish one of the spots that we actually have on the video with the Google Earth so that you can actually see where it is and how we navigate it to it and how we approach fishing it. Well guys, let's take a look at how I plan a trip from home. So I'm going to go out to Google Earth. And I'm just using a regular web browser. Google Chrome is my preference. It seems to work well with Google Earth. And I'm going to come over here and launch it. It takes you right into the web version of Google Earth. And let's take a tournament location that we previously fished, and I can give you an idea of how I prepared for it. So I'm going to search for, let's just search for Titusville, Florida. That'll take us into the vicinity, the general area. Kind of get an idea of where our launch site's going to be, which was, in this case, it was the Parish Marina, or Parish Park, over in Titusville. As you can see it here, there's Parish Park. This is where the weigh-ins were going to be located for the IFA Pro Redfish Tour. Knowing that, I kind of get an idea of where the channels are and try to stay safe while I'm traveling to all my locations. So I did discover a couple of areas that I found of interest to me. I'm just going north over the channel that leads you into Holliver Cut to get to the Mosquito Lagoon. I started noticing that there were some grass flats in the northern part of the Indian River. So we came down and we started looking at areas that had some pretty good looking grass flats. So we came all the way back into the Indian River Lagoon. There's a boat ramp that you can kind of make out here. And I think that's the Scottsmore Landing boat ramp there. and I noticed that this area between Scottsmore Landing to this little cove here, we noticed a lot of grass that was it hasn't really grown much in the northern part of the Indian River Lagoon, but these contours and these edges looked like it was just worth investigating, because you can see here the shallow flat, how shallow it gets from the main channel taking you into the North Lagoon. And we kind of highlighted these areas around here as possible areas where fish may be schooling up or staging. So we decided to go investigate there. So as you can see the contours, and you can see the shallow flats all the way leading down the edge of the Indian River Lagoon. So that's one of the areas that we keyed in on, just from that Scottsmore Landing all the way down to this little cove here. And from there were some good areas that we were looking at. Again, you can see a little bit of grass over in the eastern side of the Indian River Lagoon. A lot of points, a lot of different areas. Looks like a lot of bottom that had deeper troughs that were leading in and around the grass flats. So those were all areas that were located pressed between coves right off of points that we targeted, and we were able to find some good fish in these areas. And we kind of planned our trip as having the Indian Lagoon as our last spot, Indian River Lagoon as our last resort, because it was closest to the boat ramp, so we could make the run there. So I'm going to take you back to Parish Park for a minute, just so that you can see the total time that it would take us, or kind of give you an idea, an estimate. So there's Parish Park. Our initial run, we actually went to the Indian River Lagoon, which you take the channel all the way from Parish Park, and this takes you just follow the channel straight through the Holliver Canal, and that's this area here called Allenhurst. This is the Holliver Canal that takes you from the Indian River Lagoon to the Mosquito Lagoon. Now once you get into the lagoon, it can be sensory overload because there was so much area to cover here. So what we were looking for are points and coves pressed across some pretty well-known community spots. I'll try not to provide, for the purposes of some of the folks that fish here for a living, a lot of the names of these spots, but I'll give you an idea of generally what I look for when I'm fishing in new areas. This area is pretty well known. That's Tiger Shoals. Everyone's probably heard of that. But we were focusing on, where do these fish come in from the open water, because Mosquito Lagoon can be intimidating in terms of a lot of water to look at. So you know that this is the no motor troll zone all through here. It's all posted with poles. There is a little channel that runs behind it that you can stay on a plane, and those are clearly marked as well, the channel. So you can run pretty much on plane behind the troll motor zone. I don't recommend it. If you can get into an area where you can start push poling or put down the trolling motor and get into it quietly, that's probably the best way to not disrupt any of the grass that may be growing. I mean, it's a bit of a desert out there now, but as you can imagine, this is probably an old aerial image of Tiger Shoals, and you can see all the grass that once used to bloom there, and there used to be, before the algae bloom, and other things that contribute to the loss of all the grass. But you can see how lush all the grass flats used to be there. But that's not what I'm focusing on. Although these are great areas and fish still do school up here, what I tend to look for are pinch points. So I was looking behind Tiger Shoals and these are areas where I'd come off a plane by the, by the MART, no motor and troll zones. And then I would actually run the trolling motor as far as I could get before I started actually targeting fish at a spot. And I notice here, this area here looks like a perfect little pinch point that fish may be going from outside of this open water. This is a pretty shallow area, maybe we're anywhere between 18 inches to, down to about 6 inches. And all through here, we just noticed that this could be a nice little convergent point on both sides of this little area right here. There's just a little area that you can actually, if I zoom in, you can kind of tell that it's pretty narrow in there. But there's a little bit of a deep trough in the middle here. So we were thinking, well, these fish are probably going to come through here and get into some of these areas and probably make their way and congregate around these flats. All these different banks. There's points that you can pick. There's coves. There's all sorts of little areas that you can look for. And this is a great aerial image because you could still see the grass growing back here and all of the flats back here. So anywhere that you see where there's a little island, and just fish the points. All these little points that are here. There's a little island, there's a point, there's a point. This is a little ambush point here where fish have to swim through to get from one area to another. Out here on the back side of it, there's another point here. There's a little cove that dips into here. This is a nice little point with a little grass flat on the end of it. So we targeted this area heavily for the simple reason that it just had all the contour that I was looking for. And believe it or not, it seems like a small area, but it's a very large area, and you can actually spend pretty much your entire tournament day fishing it. But that's some of the tips and tricks, and this is how I usually prepare for my trips whenever I'm going out tournament fishing, even recreational fishing. I kind of look at some of this area and just navigate around, just take a look, just what I showed you here. And this is an area moving north that you can imagine. You can actually scoot around the lagoon pretty quickly, going about 30 miles an hour in the daytime. So the whole northern lagoon, as you can imagine, there's points and cuts, and there's all sorts of different areas that could be holding fish around here. We found a couple in some of these little pinch points, leading in between some of these grass edges and big open flats. There's plenty of area to cover. We were really interested in anything that looked like it had a cove that went into it. This is a good little area for fish to kind of congregate and look for bait trapped in these little coves. So the fish will fill up in here and they'll school up in these little areas. But not to give away too many of the spots that a lot of folks probably fish through here, but just trying to give you a general idea of how I target these areas. We'll stick to the community spots as well. If you wanted to go south of the lagoon, there's all kinds of areas down here that you can fish. Here you might get mixed up a little bit. This is a pretty well-known community area, community flat, Whale's Tail. And you can get some slot fish in here, but when you get around this area, this flat, you're going to be dealing with a lot of upper-sized, upper slot redfish and black drum. The black drum have completely taken over this area, but you might be able to find some slot fish right around in here. The eastern bank, I always look for anything that has grass, so any of this grass area that you see here, it looks like it's pretty shallow. You can see where it's deeper and then it goes into the shallow flat. A lot of this, the grass is not growing here anymore, but the fish are still there. We actually, right through this area, we found a lot of tail-end redfish. And It was one of those targeted areas that we had to pretty much make a call. You know, once you identify, you know, suspect spots that you want to try out, you pretty much have to put a game plan together. You know, how much time do I have, and how much of this area do I want to actually cover? But just look for the grass that Google Earth shows you, and look for all these deep troughs and all these points in some of these areas. Follow the deep troughs, and then, you know, be prepared to get off the big motor and get on your trolling motor as you get closer to the shallow area, so that you're not disrupting the bottom, and try to troll as much as you can and not run the big motor, and push pull if you see the tail in redfish, because they can get spooky when you get into shallow water. But take a look at it. That's how I prepare for a trip. Try to gauge, use some of the tools on Google Earth to kind of measure your distances. So, you know, say you wanted to fish this point right across from the Holliver Cut, you know, kind of draw you a line. All the way back to Parish Park, just to kind of give you a general idea of what you're dealing with here. Now this is in kilometers, so you can go back over here and switch it to miles, and it shows you that it's 11.29 miles just to make that run. So there's a lot of neat attributes with Google Earth that you can utilize. You can actually mark your spots if you find areas that you want to drop pins on, and for reference, you can do that. You know, this is a free tool that you can take full advantage of. So I'm going to end this segment here, and we'll get back to the seminar here shortly. I hope this was helpful, at least to get you started as an introduction to how to go about charting your plan for the day. Having fun here at the Mosquito Lagoon. Getting ready to get on some redfish, trout, whatever we can find. Got the Gulp jerk shad, smelt color. Seems to be matching a lot of what the bait's doing here. Another trout. Got to get through these guys to get the redfish. See that one? I have to come down from the tower. Wrong species, but still a good fish. Gonna try to land him. Come here, big guy or gal. Look at the size of that trout. Caught him on a smelt, jerk shad. Thought he was a redfish the way he was pushing. She was pushing, but perfect 28-inch trout. What the Mosquito Lagoon's known for right here. Preparation. And what you need to do in order to be successful out on the water and not have anything, fail or have anything go against your game plan when you're actually out on the water. So staying organized is probably the key element in anything related to recreational fishing, especially tournament fishing, because you want to have all of your lures, you want to have all of your hooks, you want to have all your tackle in condensed compartments and condensed gear, bags, and boxes, so that you can easily go back and grab what you need to re-rig if in case you have a break off or anything like that. But to prevent from having too much rigging going on the boat before, or during a tournament or recreational fishing, you should go about prepping all your tackle ahead of time. Try to get an idea of what kind of tackle you're going to be throwing, what kind of lures you're going to be throwing during the event, whether you're recreational fishing or tournament fishing. I approach it the same. I try to at least have 4 rods with me on the boat, and thanks to the guys over at Bull Bay Rods, I'm able to have quite a few rods that I can have with me at all times to start my preparation and start my fishing day. Typically what I like to do in the mornings is have one rigged up. As you can see, this bolt, this is a Bolt 7.6 8 to 17 pound medium heavy rod, and as you can see, this one's rigged up, or it's set up with a Stratic 3000 series reel, and these are the XGs. Great reels for this type of setup. I've gone a little heavier since the last time that we spoke at Boaters Exchange. I've actually been doing a lot of field testing for Bull Bay rods, and I find that when I use a little heavier rod, I don't put so much stress on the fish. I can bring them to the boat a lot quicker and put them in the net and not have them out there struggling, fighting. There's a little bit more backbone to this rod here, so I can actually put a little bit more heat on the fish to get them to the boat. And first thing I like to throw, first thing in the morning, when you have low light conditions and you're in an area where you can't really see them pushing yet, or you can't really sight cast them yet because the sun's not quite high enough to where you need to actually see them. Unless you're lucky enough to see them pushing, I like to call them up with a topwater plug usually. And this is a Rapala Skitterwalk, one of my favorite plugs to throw during tournaments. Typically for when you're in creeks with oyster beds at high tide, you can throw them right over the oyster beds and call them up that way, or even when you're out on the flats and you're seeing some bait moving on the flat, you can use these topwater plugs just to kind of call the fish up. They have a nice little vibration, some ball bearings in here that make a nice high-pitched sound that mimics bait getting thrashed. And that's typically what I like to throw first thing in the morning when I get out there. And then I move over to a different type of lure later on as the sun starts coming out and you have opportunities to start sight casting them. You know, I go with a totally different lure. And when you start getting into switching out lures, that's when tackle preparation and organization is paramount. I keep everything in either gear bags, as you can see here, where I have a lot of my lures. I fish some gulp quite a bit, and instead of having the packages that they come in, which are nice, they keep everything nice and sealed, I like to keep all my favorite colors in this Plano container with some of the gulp enzymes and juices in here, and it keeps them nice and fresh, and I can keep the entire variety in one little selection pod, and that works for me. And then all my hooks, I keep them in a separate box so that I can have everything from jig heads to the Slayer penetrator hooks, the owner hooks that I use for real light presentations with jerk baits. But I keep everything all in one compartment, and as you can see, I only showed you 3 compartments, and that's all I use throughout the day. And then of course, you know, some of my paddle tails and things, I like to use a little bit of scent made by Procure, bait scents, and this is something that I don't leave the house without. My favorite flavors in the Procure bait scents are the mullet, super gel, the ladyfish, and the shrimp. Those are the 3 that I commonly go to depending on where I'm fishing and what I see the fish are targeting. So that's a little bit about organization. And typically, you know, we started off with the bolt and that skitter walk first thing in the morning. And what do I switch to next? Well, if I want to continue to do a little bit of searching, always have a gold spoon rigged up, because this piece of metal, I don't know what it is about these fish, but this gold piece of metal, they seem to be attracted to it, because if you're pulling this and you don't have to do much with it, you know, you can just steadily retrieve it, and with a nice cadence to it, or just slow retrieve it back. You don't have to twitch it much unless, you know, you're sitting on structure where you're having to bounce it off of rocks and things. But typically what I do, I cast it out and I'm just reeling it straight in. That's all I'm doing, reeling it straight in. And that's all I'm doing with this bait. And it works pretty well. I tie it, I put a little split ring on it, and then I tie a loop knot at the end of it. And that's all I use to actually start targeting those fish after I've fished my topwater in the morning. And that seems to work well to try to call them up. When you start getting into sight fishing for the redfish, typically I like to switch over to like a paddle tail, and I have a totally different presentation for that. It's a little bit on the, you know, heavier side depending on what kind of structure I'm fishing. Or actually this one's still an 8-17 7/6 bull bay rod. This is the sniper lineup, and I usually throw a Slayer lures 3/16 of an ounce 3/0 hook, and that's typically what I rig my Slayer baits with, which I'll show you how I do that in a second. And then, you know, that's a good sight casting bait, or it's a good search bait as well. You can actually just steadily retrieve it, twitch it. You know, there's many different ways you can present that bait. When I want to get into the super light presentations, if I want something to drop nice and softly, you know, I'm still using the 8-17 bolt rod, 7/6. All my rods, you know, you can use a 7-foot rod, but you know, the 7-foot 6-inch rods to me allow you to cast a lot longer, a lot further, and cover a lot more water. Especially when you're throwing these lighter hooks, like I'm about to show you, that I use for sight casting fish. This is only about a 1/16 of an ounce small weight on an owner hook. It's a twist lock, which makes it perfect for tying on the the gulp jerk shads, and they seem to work pretty well. they actually cast a nice country mile with the 5-inch jerk shad, because it seems to have enough weight on it, you know, to get it out there, but it lands soft enough to where if you're casting at a fish that's pushing, or casting at a fish that you're actually seeing in the water in gin clear conditions, you want that bait to land softly and actually give him a chance to actually see the lure, pick up the scent, and pick up the lure without being spooked or without him knowing that you're actually even there. Now that's a little bit about the tackle presentation. The other thing that is very important with the preparation and everything that we're doing is the boat. You know, I'm fishing out of a beaver tail Vengeance. It's an 18-foot boat. It's rigged with 2 power poles, Power Pole Pro Series 2s. I like the Pro Series 2s over the blades. It's just a personal preference of mine. I felt like they were going to be a little lighter on this lighter skiff. And but having 2 power poles, I would never go back to having a single power pole, just because I like to stop and not have the boat pivot on me. So with the 2 power poles, it allows me to anchor down whenever I see a school of fish or whenever I see an area that I want to fan cast. The 2 power poles just kind of lock me in place. And then, of course, the boat is shallow, super light. It's rigged up with a 115 horsepower Mercury Pro XS, and the Mercury motor, I've had many motors. I was a Yamaha guy for many years, and now with the Mercury motor, I feel like I can jump on a plane a lot faster in this lighter skiff in super shallow water, which is a huge advantage when you're working your way into a flat and then you need to get off of it to check out another spot. You want a boat and a motor that's going to actually hop on a plane and not have to waste too much time on your trolling motor trying to get in and out of places before you can actually get on a plane. So that's some equipment talk related to the boat. And then, of course, my partner, Donnie Taylor, Captain Donnie Taylor, and I looked into getting a tower for the tournament boat so that we can actually elevate ourselves about 4 feet and have that much more visibility when we're trying to target fish. And believe me, when you stand on this tower, you can see for days. So when you're in gin clear conditions and you can see those fish out about 30 yards in front of you, it makes it so much easier for you to, you know, get an opportunity to make that presentation and that cast to those fish when you're elevated and you can see them. But if you get too close, the disadvantage is they can see you too. So you know, do things like keep the sun to your back when you're approaching them, and just like you would if you're push poling. Speaking of push poling, another tool that I use and we use, especially when we get into areas where we're super shallow and the fish tend to get a little spooky with the trolling motor running, we push pole quite a bit. You know, my partner gets on the front platform and I get on the poling platform, and I'm push poling with a Carbon Marine push pole. Thank you, Joe Wilburn. Best push poles that I've ever used. I've used them over the years on all my boats, and they've been great to me. And I use a lot during the tournaments when I'm trying to sneak up on fish. But to get to the flat before you can actually start push poling, you know, again, you know, another Mercury product, branded products, the Motor Guide. I have an XI5 Motor Guide trolling motor, and when you're fishing places like the Mosquito Lagoon where you have, you know, no motor zones and trolling zones only, respect that. And you know, and even when you're trying to get on a flat, as a rule of thumb, I try not to move too much on the big motor when I'm trying to sneak into a spot. I put the trolling motor down, take off the big motor, get on the trolling motor, go as far as I can until I feel like I'm getting close to where the fish are, and then from there I push pole the rest of the way. But the trolling motor is great, especially if you're creek fishing, and it's just a nice thing to have to stay stealthy and be, you know, staying quiet and give yourself an opportunity to attack these fish. So I want to get into a little bit more about rigging some of my baits on the 4 rods that I just showed you. So just bear with me in a second and we'll get into that. Well, welcome back. So we were able to get out for a little while in the lagoon before the wind picked up. So we decided to finish it off here at the house. Didn't want my cameraman to blow out of the boat. Thank you very much, Dustin Berube, for all the film and all the footage, and to my wife Carrie for also videoing and helping out with some of the grip work. But just wanted to recap a little bit about what we were using out there. We were able to see quite a few redfish in the spot that we targeted based upon the Google Earth video that we shot earlier. But we were pretty much trying to stick to our plan that we had orchestrated on Google Earth, and we ended up visiting a spot that we're holding some decent fish. There was a lot of bait in there, everything that I typically look for on a flat that, you know, would hold the fish that I'm targeting. What we saw in the video was a big trout, but there was a lot of redfish that were pushing around in there along with it. We weren't able to get one to bring onto the video, but they were there, and we made a couple of presentations at them. And sometimes that's just the way they go. They don't want to eat the baits that you're throwing at that particular time. But what I was using today on that trout was the Bolt, the 7.6 8 to 17 pound rod on a Stratic 3000 reel, and we were using a owner 3/0 16th of an ounce weight on it, and we were rigging it up with a Gulp jerk shad in the smelt color. And to show you exactly how I rigged these up, most of you probably have an idea or have seen or have been able to rig these up yourselves, but I'll give you just a quick demonstration as to how I rig them up. You essentially take the Gulp jerk shad. These owner hooks, they actually have a spring on it with a little tip that makes it easy to actually insert into the front of it. So you essentially just insert that tip and then you just twist it on. Once you have it twisted on there, all you do is measure where the hook's going to come out of the bait and then slide it in between the body. And it comes out. And as you can see, in the lagoon there's a lot of grass, so you want to keep this weedless, and that's what this hook allows you to do. You can actually insert the hook back into the bait and it makes it weedless, so you can cast it in thick grass. So that's one of the ways that you can actually get this set up, and this is what we were catching them on today, and this is what I was actually trying to present to the redfish and that trout that we caught. Okay, so we saw how to rig a jerk shad. The other bait that we would have been using today in that area would be the Slayer paddle tail. And as you can see, where I keep everything organized, I have all of my lures in easy to access little bins and pockets within my little portfolio here of baits. And one of my favorite baits to throw in a lagoon, just because it matches the bottom quite a bit, is the pinfish color. And this is just a 3.5 Slayer paddle tail. This gives it a lot of action. And what I rig it to is the Slayer penetrator hook. This hook again is a 3/16 weight that's attached to it, and it's a 3/0 hook. It works perfect for this size bait. Again, it has a spring, and it's much like the jerk shad. You essentially insert the spring into the bait, twist it on. And the same concept as the jerk shad. You just take the hook, measure it with the body where you want it to come out, insert it, have it come out, and now your bait's ready to go in the water. I like to use the 3/16 as a little heavier weight for the paddle tails, just because of the action that it gives it. It allows it to sink down and fall to the bottom, and when I'm reeling it in, it has a nice little weight for when you're actually twitching it. And you don't have to twitch this much. You actually just reel consistent most of the time. And you just want to put it, if you're sight casting them, just cast behind the fish and just reel past in front, try to bring it into the fish's cone of vision. And the vibration that the paddle tail sets off is what attracts the fish to it. And a lot of times, you know, you can actually slow the presentation down as the fish starts swimming towards it, and he'll pick it up. One of the things that I want to make sure that will attract the fish, just in case he's not picking it up with the vibration, you want to add some scent to it. And we had talked earlier about all the different scents that I like to use: the ladyfish, the shrimp, and the mullet scent flavors. And I call them flavors. Personally, I haven't tried it, but the fish seem to like it. And just apply a little bit on both sides. Just, you know, it has a little nozzle that's perfect, and you just apply on each side, just a little dab, and just it gives it that extra characteristic of not only do you have the vibration, now you have scent as well. So if you see a fish that's a little spooky, you can just drop it and he'll pick up the scent and come down and swim and grab it. So these are the two baits that I typically fish the most in the lagoon, and I think you'll have a lot of success if you try these tactics and use these baits the same way that I had presented over there to you. It's been a lot of fun. We're going to go into a couple of other things with the seminar. We still have some more talk related to some equipment for the boat, but I appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll be back with you in just a moment. Thank you. Hey, welcome back, and thank you for tuning in. Just wanted to touch base and accentuate some of the concepts that I was talking about with the Google Earth and planning your trip, trying to get an idea of what area you're going to cover on the water and how you're going to go about your game plan for today. But once you have that all together with Google Earth, and you've picked out and you've pretty much zoned in on some areas that you're willing to target and you're ready to target, the next thing that I do is I come out to my boat and I look up the Lowrance. This is a Lowrance Elite TI2, the 9-inch screen. And I go here, I have an Navionics Platinum Plus chip on here. And so I essentially go out to the chart, and all the area that I have on Google Earth, I either do it from my handheld device or a tablet. All the area that I've actually dropped pins on for where I'm thinking about fishing, I'll come out to my chart on my Lowrance unit, and I type in either the coordinates, if I happen to have them, and translate them off of Google Earth, or what I do is just simply go out on the chart. It's a very detailed chart, compare it, get the general area that I was looking at, and then I type it in and save them as waypoints here, just so that I have them marked on my GPS, so I'll have an idea of how to navigate to that location. So it's pretty simple concept. You just basically, everything that you have in Google Earth, just translate it to your GPS so that you have those waypoints in there, and it makes your life a lot easier when you're navigating on the water when you have them there, instead of trying to do it at random ad hoc the day of the tournament or the day that you set out to pre-fish. Get these waypoints on there, bring them off of what you've discovered on Google Earth, put them in your boat's GPS unit, whatever unit you may have. I have the Lowrance unit that seems to be working well with me with the Platinum Plus chip, and you'll be ready to go when you hit the water. Well, that about wraps it up. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. This is such an exciting opportunity just to come hang out on the water and talk a little bit about fishing and preparing for tournaments, and more specifically. And it's been a great time. I wanted to thank Bull Bay Rods for all their great rods that they've built for me over the years. Lithium battery power, which is what I use to power my boat and my trolling motor, and couldn't think of a better battery to have. Mercury Marine for the great motor that they've placed on this beavertail boat. It runs awesome. Thank you guys. Liz and Will at Beavertail Skiffs for building me an awesome boat that allows me to do this and get into the shallow water where I can target these fish. Power pole, shallow water anchors, great. I couldn't imagine being out on the water without having the 2 power poles on the boat. And most importantly, thank you Boaters Exchange for having me out there and having the opportunity to, have the seminar. And I look forward to coming back out and speaking again soon at a future event. Thank you so much.